you're going to find something, hopefully, you'll find something in life that brings you happiness. But I'm promising you that one thing, happiness is not something that can be pursued. It has to ensue, it has to come from something that you're doing. And we talk about happiness sometimes. Like we say, oh, I do this thing and I get happy. I get happy. It's like happiness is something that you're being given, like you're receiving it. And if you have to receive things, then that means that happiness is not really in here at all. Happiness is only to be found out there, so that means you're always pursuing the things that are out there. Whereas if you can find a way, and it's possible, find a way to be happy with the situations in which you find yourself, regardless of the circumstances. Find meaning, find purpose in whatever it is that you're doing. And if nothing else, it brings you a sense of accomplishment and a sense of meaningful fulfillment of responsibility. And then ultimately, a strange thing happens, it kind of makes you happy. But you're getting the idea. So now going back to what Lucia was saying about finding happiness. So what's a marker?
Something to write.
Something to write with. Okay. Does it have a pencil? Is this a marker? It's a pencil.
Oh, no.
Okay. So what would be specific to it being a marker? It's not a trick question.
The way it draws, like the way you write.
What's the way? On a whiteboard? Yeah, so it uses ink on a whiteboard. Okay, fair enough. What's a car? Automobile.
Something you can drive in?
So it's a thing that you drive. You got an engine, 4 wheels, 3 wheels sometimes. Okay, fair enough. What's happiness? Okay, let me back up. Where can I go get a marker?
The store.
Which store?
Walmart.
Any store? So I walk into a Food for Less, I get a marker. And where can I get a marker? Walmart? Okay. Where can I buy a car? Dealership? Okay. Where can I get happiness?
Money. Finding something.
You would think. But if that was the case, if it really was money, why is suicide a disease of the very young and the very wealthy? What's enough? Right. This is the thing when we don't think about things and we just blurt shit out. There's really no answer to it. There's a reason there's something that wealthy people have learned about having lots and lots of wealth. And we tend to think of it like, well, if I had their money, you wouldn't do anything that you think you would do. There's a reason that wealthy people do what wealthy people do and that poor people do what poor people do. And I've mentioned before, wealthy people are really, really good at telling poor people what they should do with their money and time. And poor people are really, really good at telling rich people what they should do with their money. See how we're always doing great things about telling other people what they should do rather than doing the things ourselves? There's a reason for that. So if I ask you what happiness is, and by the way, I didn't ask you what brings happiness. This is why we should pay attention to the questions that are asked. Because without knowing how to answer the questions, we can't possibly come to a proper answer. I didn't ask you what brings happiness, I asked you what is happiness. And then after that, where can I get it? Not what brings it, where can I get it? Because we can get a car from a dealership, right? Okay, we can get a marker from Walmart. But there's a problem there. You could tell me what a marker was. So once you know what it is, now you know how to get it. You can tell me what a car is. So now once you know what it is, now you know where you can get it. But you can't tell me what happiness is. So it shouldn't surprise us that therefore we don't know where we can go get it. Or, by the way, you wouldn't even know if you found it. Because if you don't know what it is, you don't even know if you have found it. Does this make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. And yet, there's a weird thing in all of us that we all seem to kind of like intuitively know what happiness is, although we can't explain it, we can't define it. We seem to think we know what it is when we feel it, but we've also noticed, as Lucia was saying, that that's something that goes away. It has to be renewed from time to time, because happiness is a fleeting thing, at least joy certainly is. There's a question about whether or not there can even be a thing called happiness. In other words, like a perpetual state versus joy, which comes at, from events or from feelings or whatever. And so one thing that we maybe can learn is that happiness comes from fill in the blank. With what? I don't know. What brings happiness for you? Like, what's something that when you guys are doing it, it makes you happy?
Eating food.
Eating food. Yeah. So eating food. Possibility? Eating food doesn't bring me happiness. I have almost no sense of taste. That's why I eat really spicy things or really bold flavors. I can't taste much. Getting home every night is a matter of like, what am I going to eat? Because nothing sounds good. But that's good. You have found something. And by the way, how do I know that food doesn't bring me happiness?
You don't feel joy from it.
Yeah, I don't feel joy when I'm doing it. Yeah, how do you know that food does bring you happiness? Think obvious. I'm not trying to trick you.
Makes you feel good, I guess.
Yeah, it makes you feel good when you're doing it. So it makes you feel good when you're doing it. It doesn't make me feel good when I'm doing it. So you've discovered some things about yourself, and I've discovered some things about myself. What you're gonna learn is that happiness can't really be pursued because you don't know what it is. And even if you knew what it was, you wouldn't know where to find it. So how can you go pursuing something that you don't know what it is or where to find it? Instead, happiness has to come from something that you're doing. Happiness can't be pursued. It has to ensue. In other words, you have to find yourself one day feeding pigeons and say, I really enjoy feeding pigeons. Anybody guys? Any of you guys or anybody know who Mike Tyson is?
He loves
Boxer.
pigeons.
That guy loves pigeons. If you go to 20-year-old Mike Tyson, who's the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world, and the guy's making millions of dollars per fight, and you tell him, hey man, in the future, you're going to really love pigeons. He just said, yeah, great, no way. But then you fast forward to his life, and that's what it was. One day he was feeding a pigeon, and he realized that by giving that pigeon something, the pigeon seemed to appreciate it, and he just started liking pigeons. But that's something he never would have discovered, probably, by the way, unless his career and everything had completely collapsed. It kind of took that collapse for him to find a simple joy in something like feeding pigeons. Sometimes in life you're going to have to collapse in some way and find yourself doing something really, really small, and then realize, wow, this is a simple thing that I never would have noticed before. I would have enjoyed. And suddenly you find yourself enjoying it. And so it takes doing things, trying things. You know, when we're bored and we're just kind of sitting around going like, I'm bored. We're reporting the obvious to ourselves. I'm bored. There's something that would make you happy. There's something that would bring you joy and excitement. And a lot of times it might be the things you think, but a lot of times it's just not the things that you think. You know, like if you're at home on a Saturday night and you're going through Instagram and all your friends are posting that they're at parties and doing all this fun stuff, and you're sitting there in your bed, I'm bored. That might cure your boredom, for sure. And it might bring you a little bit of a spike of joy. But you have to wake up tomorrow. And then the question is, what's going to bring you joy tomorrow? And if you're going to be constantly pursuing it, it's going to always be evading you. You know, you're going to find something, hopefully, you'll find something in life that brings you happiness. But I'm promising you that one thing, happiness is not something that can be pursued. It has to ensue. It has to come from something that you're doing. Because think about the way that we talk about happiness sometimes. Like we say, oh, I do this thing and I get happy. I get happy. It's like happiness is something that you're being given, like you're receiving it. And if you have to receive things in order to be happy, I don't just mean things, but you get what I'm saying, then that means that happiness is not really in here at all. Happiness is only to be found out there, so that means you're always pursuing the things that are out there. Whereas if you can find a way, and it's possible, find a way to be happy with the situations in which you find yourself, regardless of the circumstances. And there's a way of doing that, to find meaning, to find purpose in whatever it is that you're doing. And if nothing else, it brings you a sense of accomplishment and a sense of meaningful fulfillment of responsibility. And then ultimately, a strange thing happens. It kind of makes you happy that you've done those things. And so I guess what I'm saying is that, is it fun to go to parties? Of course. Is it fun to travel? Of course. But how much of your life is really made up of parties and traveling? Most of your life is made up, like right now, for example, of sitting in a classroom 6 hours a day. And if you find it incredibly boring, there's no wonder that you hate your life right now. If instead you can find some way to find some level of joy or happiness in it, find a way to make it interesting, whatever way that is, well, now you've just taken 6 hours of your life every day that was mind-numbing skull drudgery, and you've now changed it into something that's going to maybe bring some joy into your life in some way. maybe the subject, maybe the people around you, maybe just finding the absurdity in all of it. You know, in other words, something, finding something. And then that's a big part of it also. You have to find the thing. Isn't it you just receive it? But happiness has to be something inside of you that you're ready to recognize it when you do find it. Because again, unless we know what it is, we don't know how to go looking for it. And even if we do find it, we won't even know we found it because we won't even know what it is. So, does that make sense? Because I have an illustration, but it's a long one. I don't really want to go into it. Okay. So happiness is the absence of the striving for happiness. Because if you're striving for it, it's going to be going away. Just like you were saying at the beginning, it was about, you know, a person who sits there is like, I just wish I could find someone. And you're striving for it. And then when you don't get it Monday, guess how you feel Monday? Miserable. And if you don't get it Tuesday, you're miserable. If you don't get it Wednesday, you're miserable. And by the way, when you finally do get it in the year 2037 or whatever, whenever you finally find someone, then you're going to hold on to that thing so tightly, you're probably going to smush it. Probably going to destroy it because you're terrified of going back to feeling the way that you felt before. And first off, it's going to be very hard to find somebody because, let's face it, guys, if you're sitting there and you're like this whiny little simp of a thing, you know, curled up in the corner, you are not attractive. I just want to find someone who can. That is not attractive, man, and that's going to be part of your problems right there. But secondly, when you do finally do it, you're going to behave in really desperate ways because you're going to be terrified of losing it because you finally got it, and if you hold on to it so tightly, and your knuckles even turn white because you're holding on to it so tightly, you're going to destroy it anyway. And so again, that's because we're looking outside of ourselves for something about happiness. So if we can learn to look inside of ourselves for a way to receive it and to recognize it and to see it, then there's lots and lots and lots of little opportunities throughout the day to find joy and happiness. Not that the whole damn day is going to be fantastic and great, but you're going to find 10, 12, 15, 20 ways of enjoying the day. Maybe in that way, finding some level of happiness. Yeah. Your brain actually gets rewired, and it becomes very difficult for your brain to physically get all of the endorphins that it wants. Long story, but trust me on this. That's how people get addicted to it. The same kind of thing is like that. Like your first date. Let's go skydiving, and afterwards we'll fly to Paris and eat at my favorite restaurant. Well, how do you top that now? And then 3 weeks later, you're sitting on a couch watching Netflix, actually watching Netflix. And then you're trying to figure out, like, how can we possibly top what we did that one day? You know, this is why, you know, those first things should be getting to know people, because it's even like the promposals. My God, you really have to make a huge production out of it. You better have a great plan for prom then, and not just a great plan for prom, but a great plan for the week after, and the week after, and the week after. Because it's not just that we're blasting somebody with a whole bunch of expectations. But we're also setting ourselves up for those expectations. Now you're under stress because you got to keep coming up with something. And now the relationship is more stressful than anything else. I'm not saying we should, you know, just keep the bar really low, but, you know, the lower it is, the easier it is to go over it. You know? So I was just thinking about, I was saying earlier, I was thinking about this story I heard recently about somebody who asked somebody out. It was a good boss move. I've told some of my people about it, and they're like, that's a real boss move. One of my former students was like, well done. So, anyway. Questions? Comments? Yeah?
What brings you happiness?
That's a good question. Others?